Picture this. You rent your property on Vrbo. Your guests check in to the luxurious property, they enjoy their stay, and then when it's time for them to check out, they refuse to leave. You send messages to the guests, you contact the booking platform, you show up to the property, you knock on the door, you plead with the guests to leave, but they just utterly refuse to leave. So what options does the property owner or property manager have if the guest refuses to leave when it's time for them to go? I'm Christopher Charles, a real estate attorney and managing partner at Provident Law. Facing this situation where guests refuse to leave your property can be one of the most stressful, annoying, and difficult situations that a property owner can face when dealing with their short-term rental property. In this short video, I will walk you through the various legal options that property owners and managers have to address this difficult situation under Arizona law. The first step to take if you find yourself in this situation where a guest refuses to leave is to contact the booking platform such as Vrbo or Airbnb. Many times, the booking platform can immediately step in and quickly resolve the situation under their terms and conditions that they have with the guest. This is by far the best option for the property owner because it doesn't cost the owner anything, and we're leveraging the service that you have engaged to help you out to try to mitigate the problems. So the second option, if we don't have the option of availing ourselves of the booking platform, is to first understand what laws apply. What I mean by that is we need to discern whether the Arizona Residential Landlord-Tenant Act applies or the innkeeper statutes. So the Residential Landlord-Tenant Act has really important protections for families that makes it a little more time-consuming and difficult for an occupant to be evicted. So the Residential Landlord-Tenant Act applies generally anytime the rental term is 31 days or more. But importantly, the Arizona Residential Landlord-Tenant Act expressly carves out an exception for transient lodging. But it's really critical that the property owner or manager understand conclusively what set of rules we're playing by. Step 3. If we've determined that the innkeeper statutes and not the Residential Landlord-Tenant Act applies, then we can consider what we refer to as a non-judicial lockout of the guest. Now, this is similar to what a hotel will do when they have a non-paying guest or someone who just outstays their reservation. The general idea being that the property owner simply changes the locks and compels the removal of the guest that way. But importantly, a lockout is only going to be applicable if it is a short-term rental scenario, not governed by the Landlord-Tenant Act, so it has to be a term for 30 days or less, and the owner must have an express short-term rental agreement with the guest that expressly authorizes the owner to perform a non-judicial lockout in the event of a default. All right, moving on to step 4. If we determine that a non-judicial lockout is not an option, then we need to consider whether we must send a formal written notice to vacate. Particularly if the Residential Landlord-Tenant Act applies, that written notice is probably going to be necessary. And there are some pitfalls under the Residential Landlord-Tenant Act that accompany any notice. Next, after we've determined what notice, if any, is applicable, and after any notice period has been complied with, the next step is to go ahead and proceed with an eviction action in the court. Fortunately, residential evictions or commercial evictions under Arizona law are a speedy and efficient process. Typically, we can get a hearing within 5 days of filing the complaint for eviction, and typically you can get a judgment for eviction on the actual date of the hearing. Legal fees are reasonable under the circumstances as well, and the short-term rental agreement should provide that the guest is responsible for all court costs and legal fees in the event of a default. Another step that I didn't mention is to contact the police. You might get lucky and they might respond and help remove the guest. Most of the time, in my experience, the police will respond by indicating that they can't forcefully remove the guest without a court order. But I have seen my clients get lucky a couple of times where the police did intervene and helped remove the guest so that they didn't have to go to court. So I don't see a downside to contacting the police, just don't get your hopes up. Last, just a word to the wise, please be careful before deciding to exercise any self-help. I understand it can be tempting to want to take matters into your own hands and do things like towing vehicles or just changing the locks without getting legal advice. Be careful before doing that. Get legal advice, and generally you're going to want to follow the steps that we just walked through. For example, if you do a non-judicial lockout and it's determined by the court that that was unlawful, occupant can bring a claim against the property owner and or property manager for civil claims like trespass, wrongful eviction, even intentional infliction of emotional distress. Be careful before exercising self-help. Get legal advice before you even think about anything like that. I've worked with hundreds of property owners over the last 10 plus years regarding short-term rentals, and nobody ever thinks this is going to happen to them. But it does happen from time to time. There are a couple of things that we can do to mitigate against the risks that could come up when we have an occupant that overstays their welcome. First thing I recommend is security deposit. Unlike the Arizona Residential Landlord-Tenant Act, if this is just a short-term rental agreement, we have no limitation on the security deposit that we request. If it is governed by the Arizona Residential Landlord-Tenant Act, then we cannot request a security deposit that is greater than 1.5 times the monthly rent. Other than a security deposit, the other thing that we can do to mitigate our risks is to request background checks on the prospective guests. I have a couple of resources available. Feel free to shoot me an email or a call, and I can connect you with tenant screening services that can pretty efficiently run these checks on potential occupants. So just to wrap things up, if your short-term rental guest refuses to leave when the term expires, please remember you do have great legal options under Arizona law. Now, I've been practicing law, real estate law, for over 20 years. I've handled thousands of evictions. Only 2 times in my career have we had to resort all the way to the writ of detainer executed by the sheriff or constable to forcefully remove the guest. So that is rarely, thankfully, rarely needed, but that option is available to us if and when necessary. If you are a property owner or property manager facing this issue today with your short-term rental property, call Provident Law today so that we can guide you through this tricky and complicated process and help explain and identify all of your best possible legal options. I'm Christopher Charles. Thank you for watching. If this has been helpful for you today, please feel free to subscribe to our channel, and please share this with anyone you know who may be interested in more information about short-term rental properties.